it for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Playing on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Playing on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast.
Simmer Down with Shawn Simpson. Brady Tkachuk with the tip. His 100th goal in his 300th game, and it's a Gordie Howe hat trick to tie it.
The sickest Ottawa Senators podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Happy Tuesday, everybody in Ottawa. I am sitting live, and you know, from the TSN days, I'm in the North Manitic Estate. I'm ready to rock and roll here. Got a nice little audience today. Echo the dog just kind of cruising. It's one of those days in November. You just want to kind of hunker down. And for the next hour, maybe longer, maybe shorter, we're going to sit around, chew the fat, talk a little bit of Ottawa Senators, going to talk a little bit of National Hockey League, and just kind of get you through the lunch break. I don't even call it a lunch break. It's a little simmer down action. And of course, want to welcome in my co-pilot, my good friend from good old Gatineau.
How we doing?
Say hello. Good. Justin, how you doing today, brother?
I'm good. A little work in the morning and ready for the pod now. Some good
now,
hockey last night. So
yeah. And yesterday, you had a little malfunction at the junction there where the hot water was turned off. It looked like your flow is actually pretty good by the time the show started. So give us a little update on Gatineau's water situation.
The water back around 2. I made do yesterday, but today we got the hair going a little better.
Yeah. Now on a power ranking in the province of Quebec, where do you think the Gatineau area kind of ranks when it comes to troubleshooting or even caring about the fact that it's part of the province?
Well, I know. Well, you almost wish it was part of the national capital region.
Oh, big. I totally. It's almost like Northern Virginia with DC.
100%. It should be. I mean, transportation, schools, all that should be kind of lumped into one, I think. It's so far away from the rest of the province, and these people are different over here. They especially in true Gatineau. Old Hall, Elmer, good. True Gatineau, there's some beauties in there. So I like it.
One of the biggest shambles or disgraces of all time was calling the Hull Olympics the Gatineau Olympics. Like, who in their God's name? Like, you grew up with it, right? And we'll get into kind of the whole Chauvel angle. Like the Hull Olympics, that's a brand, was it 100%, not?
100%.
Right?
And I still call them that at most of the time without even realizing.
Oh, me too. Now, who would your dad's favorite player have been that he drafted that played for the Hull Olympic?
Peter Worrell, I would almost imagine.
Oh my God!
Saw him at the Chauvel Midget tournament, and saw him at the Chauvel Midget hockey tournament, which used to be a massive tournament, and then he was his ever since, I think.
Man, you know what's funny? I still remember we were at a bar in Sweden. First year I'd gone to Sweden, and we were sitting around having 1,000 beers, which we charged to another scout's room. That in itself was a great moment. Some scouts were making fun of Timmy for drafting Peter Worrell. Yeah. Did he ever get fired up? But wasn't it neat? Isn't that a neat story where you see a guy 100%. Come from? You know, I know you're part of drafting Mark Stone, and that's even a higher one. But Peter Worrell was terrible. But at the same time, man, oh man, do you imagine if he came into today's game? Like, I look at Jack Guy as kind of the guy in Montreal who's coming along. But do you imagine if Peter Worrell was playing today, the impact that he'd have on a lineup?
Yeah, no, he was big, tough, and I mean, didn't come from a great place and just worked his way up to the league, you know, and that's something to be proud of. And he was the the Florida Panthers always did their training camp at the Bob Burton. So I was lucky enough to go there quite a bit and be the stick boy. Pavel Bure was around. Nice. I have good stories about that. Peter Worrell, though, was always so good to me and my buddy Danny Hobbs. You know, he'd break a knob in a stick and he'd run it right over to us and this is for you boys. You know, always. He was my favorite player.
Who was I know it was Charlie Henry. Was Claude the coach around then? Claude Julien? I
think he might have been. Yeah,
they had some great coaches from AV to Claude, and some great players came through there, of course, include Jerry Romick. My favorite Peter Worrell story, though, has to be when he got pulled over in Florida for a DUI. And he used the Swedish defenseman's driver's license. Yeah, I forget his name, happened to be white. Yeah, I'm blanking on it as well.
Yeah.
No, I thought to myself, that is an absolute classic right there. And I can picture the defenseman, kind of picture the name, should have had it, but again, one of the stories.
I think.
Yeah. Well, that's how small the hockey world ends up being. It wasn't fun even after the show yesterday and seeing so. And I'll have to ask you, growing up in Chauvel, like everyone I've ever met from Chauvel is English. Like, what was it like growing up in that area where it's a containment and the height of separation? Like, it couldn't have been worse to be like, even when we used to go over to the bars, Justin, when I was young, like, it wasn't a good place to be if you're a Canadian kid from Ontario. You're just asking for trouble.
It's funny. Like, I kind of was just after that. I'm born in 1990, but I do know like they came to our town with looking to get us to change our signs to French and that. So there was a big stand up and commotion there. But it's funny. You go to Ontario to play hockey, they call you Frenchman. They go to Quebec. They call you Englishman. You just didn't fit in anywhere.
Weren't we squareheads though? I thought we were squareheads.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we used to play against the Gatineau Ambassadors growing up, and they had a really good program. And I actually thought it was really fun. And you'd always hear them talking, voici, let's go, les gars. Yeah. And the other thing that was always fun, we always played over there. And I swear, and they'd say the same thing about us. I remember all of a sudden it'd be a close game. We'd have a breakaway. The Zamboni door would come open. It was just classic.
Yeah, 100%. It was in the hockey though in Quebec. It was great whenever I was playing. There was probably about 6 teams in our league through just in this Gatineau area, and it was good hockey. It was competitive, and you'd have that rivalry and between the languages, and then with the double letters, then you'd be playing with those guys, and they're all guys, So
absolutely. Some of my best experiences going to the different places around. It was funny because the passion was always they were your best friend when they won, and then they were lower than whale shit when they lost, which I love. But a couple of things, we played in the Hull tournament as a midget team, Gloucester, and we ended up winning it, which was a big deal. Beat Detroit Little Caesars. But I had never, and I don't know if it was midget or minor midget, I had watched the Lac St. Louis team play out of Montreal. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, we thought Detroit Computer was on a level. I had never. Shawn Anderson was the leader of the team. My buddy Dougie Honegger had Bruce Coles, a bunch of other guys. Yeah. It was incredible what that program was able to do. And it was really fun. It was a culture. It was a cool place to go over to.
Long-standing program that has produced tons of players.
Oh, man. And they said, what was funny about them, too? They were way ahead of the curve back in the day. And I'm glad the Quebec League has improved. But for a long time when I was playing, it was a gong show. It was a goon show. You didn't have the Atlantic Canada angle. And they sent a lot of those kids to U.S. scholars, right? Almost all of them went south 100%. Of the border. We ended up just starting out in scouting, but it drafted Reggie Savage, who had played there. Didn't end up making a big impact in the National Hockey League, but it was very good. So what was the impact of the show yesterday? How many people reaching out to you? We kept it a pretty good secret, but obviously the Murray family is a royalty, hockey royalty here in Ottawa. So it must have been a little bit of fun for people to connect.
It was good. Lots of people reaching out, which I appreciate. Lots of good feedback. And I think it's showing that we can do a good job here, and people are hungry for some hockey talk.
Yeah, even in the back there, people were asking me, who's the guy with the glasses? And I said, well, that's a young Doug MacLean. And obviously at that point, Dougie didn't have an eyewear program with the Caps. And then, as you know, he became kind of slick, Doug, very cool with the eyewear, all the different fashion. But as we can see to the left, to your right, Dougie's eyewear there is pretty classic. I don't even know. That might be the Al Arbor look. That was what he was trying to pull off at the time.
Yeah, anyways. That could be. Maybe we'll have him on at some point.
Oh God, that would be great. He tells great stories, and I know he just had a book coming out, and always fun. When the big coaching change happened when I was playing the American Hockey League, of course Brian got let go, Terry went up, Dougie came down, and we had a pretty good team. I was already transitioning into being the third goalie. It was Jimmy Rivnak out of Montreal, Bob Mason, and myself. And I just remember Dougie telling me, "Listen, I think we've got some great depth in goal, but if Simmer has to play, we're screwed." And you know what? That was the way he acted. And it was my realization that maybe broadcasting and radio was going to be in my career. But I'll tell you what, Terry was great and a great technician of the game. The personality, Doug was fun. He came down, and man, oh man, we had such a hoot, and had a pretty good team that year. And now he's settled down. What's he doing? A little PEI relaxation?
I think so. I think
retirement.
Is he still the mayor out there, or the
absolutely
governor?
That was a shame a few years ago. And I won't get off too off track. When JR passed away, his buddy that had worked for Columbus, I think he worked for the LCBO and then came to work for the Blue Jackets. Used to see him everywhere. Good Island guy. So we'll talk about that. Good. Now, of course, people have tuned in. I'll call it the North Mantic Estate. What are we going to call? You're in the Zibby program. We're going to have to come with a fancy name. We'll just say you're the penthouse. The penthouse, right?
The penthouse. Yes, we could do that. It's the smallest penthouse here, but we'll
maybe you take the zip line right into the show.
That would be something.
You go right into the window. Have you done the zip line?
I haven't. I've seen lots of people from my roof doing it, though.
Yeah, we ended up doing it. I did it with Mira and the boys, and it was fun to do. It only lasts a bit. That's where I realized how big my ass was and how chubby I was in a sense of. When they jumped off the line, it was just kind of like a little drop here. When I dropped, I thought my ass was going to hit the river. Yeah. And then as I was coming in for the stop, I was like, am I supposed to be going this fast at this point? But it ended up being a pretty good little thing. They'll do a video for you, a little thing. That's a very cool area that you're in.
Yeah, it is. It is.
All right, enough of the background talk. Let's get into what is the hot topic of the day. And we continue to chew around, talk about the Ottawa Senators. And I wanted to go back to kind of the DJ Smith situation. Yep. And I don't know if you followed some of the quotes yesterday. Wanted to talk about the human dynamic. And here we are, and here I am talking about a coaching change. And I know DJ Smith yesterday in his presser brought up his family, brought up his children. And I also understood where he said, you know what, he's not feeling the pressure, which we all know he is. Yeah. I guess just some thoughts on that, Justin, on the human element. And at the same time, let's play both sides of this in the sense of, if I'm an owner, I recognize that. But is that also, I guess, in a sense, not a bit of a cry for help and understanding? And I guess I kept thinking about Brian this morning of dealing with coaches and understanding when at times, when is the human aspect right to make a change? I mean, forget about the professional side. Understand that somebody is not having a whole lot of fun at their job right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Listen, like, you don't want to talk about people getting fired. That's no fun. But it is a privilege and an honor to work in this league. You make good money. You're at the top of the leagues. So that's a part of it. And it's happened to Brian. It's happened to my dad. It's happened to Terry. So you go through it. It's no fun, especially for the kids. It sucks. But at the end of the day, you're going to be proud that your dad had that job. And like we talked about yesterday, there's a good chance he can get a job in the league again. And if he does get fired, and who knows, he has, like, it sounds like they're going to give him time to turn it around. And I'd be, if he does, awesome. That would be great. I would love to see that. I think all the fans would love to see that. But is that realistic? We'll see over time. But
the part to it, and I guess I'm speaking from my experience, not only in dealing with DJ, but over the 11 years, I can't believe how many times, for mostly it ended up being my Twitter account, how many times people from the Sens contacted people from Bell Media above my boss, JR, and would complain about tweets. And a year ago in training camp, I mentioned that I thought DJ Smith should work smarter in training camp versus harder. He or somebody of his family actually contacted one of the big boys at Bell to complain about it. And I, first of all, it was ridiculous, the tweet itself. And I'd never think to call anybody's employment. Now, I'm the one kind of on the air stirring it up. But to me, that was a real signal of, if you're letting in that background noise, and again, I know that this happened with the Sens, and I guess to part of my point, I recognized and I realized this when I worked for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And part of, I think, what hurt me after my time in Toronto is how magnified. I think about Dave Poulin and Craig Button. It's one thing to work for one team, and it's another thing to get fired. In the Canadian market, it's so different. And I'll never forget working with John Ferguson, who I have the utmost respect for. First of all, you should have never got his job as a general manager in Canada. And secondly, say hi to Echo the dog. Hey, girlies. She's coming in for a little showtime there. She's my one guest. But I recognize what it's like in Canada, and for Fergie to take that first job. But what it was, Justin, was as a man, and he must have been groomed by his dad, and anybody that knew the late, great John Ferguson, just a man's man. And here's a guy living in Toronto. He's got a young family. You come in as an absolute rock star. It's the greatest thing ever. Then next thing you know, it becomes super personal. It got to the point where somebody put a knife on his front door. They ended up having to get a security system and everything else. So imagine now you're going around, and that particular year, as he was coming close to getting fired, it was really neat because his father was dying of cancer. He's dealing with all this pressure. I could see it in the meetings. I could see it with the media. But what he could do that I would never have the power to do, because part of what I'll say with DJ Smith is I was in that spot more when I worked for Washington, where the pressure just takes you over your life. But it was amazing that all of a sudden we'd be out going for beers. And I'm sure Brian was like this. You would swear that nothing was going on in the world. His ability to put that aside, to realize, hey, I'm out to support the boys today. I'm in Toronto. We're having meetings. I'm going to hop out with you. I'm going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to talk some hockey. I just couldn't believe what an incredible skill he had. And as I said, coming from his dad, and I really applauded that. And going back to DJ Smith, that's where I think they should make a coaching change. I know he's not a fan of mine. I don't know him very well, but that's okay. I'm here to do my job. I'm here to be a professional. But this idea, and especially in Canadian markets, when people throw out that they don't listen, that they don't know what's going on. And as I said, I can speak from experience behind the scenes, how many things have come back to me over the years, and some of them such meaningless things. This is where I also say to you, if you're trying to run the hockey team right now, and we'll get into Brady Tkachuk, I would also, from an ownership standpoint, understand this isn't just a blip on the road. And are you actually doing DJ Smith? And he's a warrior. You know, I go back to interviewing DJ for the draft. He wasn't a very talented guy. He had a nice career for himself. He's a player's player, a team guy, a guy you 100%. Want on it. But do you also cross a line where, okay, he's going to battle and say all the right things? At what point, for lack of a better term, do you also have to put the person out of their misery and recognize he's not going to have any forward progress, that so much pressure has happened in him? And then the other part I'll say to you, and you'd know this firsthand from many layers, what's it like at home? And I think back to going home, even in the United States market, where your family starts to feel it. And I think of the dynamic when Terry took over for Brian.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine, like, behind the scenes, Justin, it's not easy. And I do so respect that. But at what point, and I know last year when the season ended, he was quick to get out of Dodge. And I think for the family, it was like, enough is enough. At what point is it okay? And I'm not going to step away. I'm a warrior. I'm going to battle. But as ownership and Steve Staios, do you say to yourself, listen, we just got to make a change here for many reasons, including the on-ice product?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. It's all about perspective, I guess, from him. You have to realize you've worked your butt off to get up here. You should be proud of that. And no one could take that ever away from you. So this league, you get hired to get fired. I mean, all the best coaches have been fired. So it is what it is. It sucks for the family. But you just have to realize that your dad has done a great job to get where he is, and he's still young. It's not like his coaching career is over by any means. So, but all you can do is just try and improve after this, and that's all. Learn. Like, if it's your first job in anything, you are going to improve over time, right? So you should be that much better for your second one. And I get the family maybe around him being a little upset with people saying stuff, but that's just the nature of the business. He has to do his job. We have to do our job. And that's just the nature of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's magnified when you're in Canada. And one of the things behind the scenes, I was pretty lucky from going as a hockey player, working right into the National Hockey League. But I will say this, one of the things I learned pretty quickly, a couple of things from scouting standpoint, guys that become general managers, broadcasters who work their way up, and coaches. And I think back to Bruce Cassidy, Peter Laviolette, Bruce Boudreau. I think there was one other, maybe John Cooper. We're all in the East Coast Hockey League one time. You imagine looking around at that and where they worked up this. And I think one of the best stories in all of coaching is Sheldon Keefe. When you go back to the whole David Frost situation, I think it was David Frost or whatever his name was, the agent. He was in Pembroke, Ontario, in the Central Junior Hockey League for 8 years. Justin, you know that area very well. Do you think when you start in Pembroke, and of all people, I believe your dad coached in Pembroke in London, or your grandfather coach at Rockland? Brian
did, Brian did in Pembroke and Rockland.
But he started there, went to the Sioux, went to the Marlies. He's coaching the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, 100%. To me, and I love it. And DJ Smith, I met him. I go Craig Berube. A lot of guys you meet when you see him as players, you think, well, this guy's a banana. He'll never be a coach in the National Hockey League. So applaud him.
And like you talk about Bruce, though, like that's a great example. Like, didn't he struggle early on in his career? Like, more so than, let's say, DJ as an example, and he just won a cup. So like anything, you stick with it, you become better over time, and wouldn't that be a great story down the road? You know, DJ continuing to be better, and he has lots of time to do it. He's not an old guy by any means. He's done well in other leagues, and that's just a natural progression. Sometimes it is just a voice too, you know. And what I like when I think about it, what coaches other than really John Cooper that has started a rebuild and took them right to being a cup contender. So it's just a natural progression, I think, in the NHL, and probably all sports that you need a new voice to kind of get you to that next step. And then maybe that coach that did get fired will become that coach that takes a team to its next step down the road too, right?
No, so, I agree. And as far as Butchie, a great story. And it's interesting when you look at the different dynamics, different sports. I think with basketball, you look at the Miami program, you look at San Antonio, those things. And I think that's a bit of the college effect, right? Where guys come in, coach, and they're the face of the program. Where in hockey, I think it's a little bit different. As far as Bruce Cassidy, first of all, I was with Washington when we hired Butchie, and we'd come off a very good coach in Ron Wilson. And it was interesting because it was down to Bruce Cassidy, and it was down to a veteran coach. And at the time, it's just a bit of comedy, and not to take away from Butchie, but Ted Leonsis told us, well, Butchie's the better looking of the two, so I think we should hire him. And so we ended up hiring Butchie as a coach, and he came in and we had on paper a great hockey team, a paper team, a real good paper team. But we had the most goddamn miserable human being on the planet in a guy like Yager, who didn't want to be in Washington, would play video games and poker all day, would drive around in a car with his dad. He was $3 million in debt. He was just a miserable. And I think looking back at it, Justin, you realize the mental health aspect to that. There was no reason for Bruce Cassidy in a sense of he couldn't be successful. And it was a lot of pressure.
When your best players aren't engaged, I mean, it's tough.
Exactly. If your best players, you're not connecting, they're not working hard. But for Butchie, here's the neat part. He bottomed out early. And for a lot of guys, they'll never work their way back. What does he do? And of course, our good friend Wayne Smith is a close friend of his, Peter Chiarelli. He had, of course, come from Grand Rapids at that time, that was Ottawa's farm team. He circles back and coaches the Kingston Frontenacs, or whatever the hell they were called at the time. Alain Vigneault did the same thing. But to imagine, to suck it up, and I say this from my own career, and at times you take yourself so seriously, and I'm too good for that. Bruce Cassidy said, I'm going to go back. I'm going to work in junior. I'm going to be successful at Kingston. Then I'm going to go be an assistant coach to Rob Murray in Providence. Going to work my way up. Then I'm going to become an assistant coach to Claude Julien. Now he's at the top of the food chain. That to me is, first of all, when you talk about a guy, perseverance, battle, good support from his wife and his family. Now he's sitting there. He should win the Jack Adams this year if it continues along. He's got a Stanley Cup under his belt. He's got justified for being let go by the Boston Bruins. But I do love those stories. And to your 100%. Point, DJ Smith has all of that. But I just kind of wanted to address that portion of it because, as I said, I don't want to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. I recognize and respect it, but that's also, again, where the grown-ups, the ownership group, people above you have to recognize, okay, he's a battler. It's like a player being injured where you appreciate, you're like, oh my God, he's playing with a blown out knee. He's playing with a separated shoulder. Yeah, he ain't doing anything. There's no reason for him to be in the lineup, but at some point you got to draw a bit of a line. So that's just my thoughts on DJ Smith. And then I'll also make this, go ahead, Justin.
No, I was just going to say, like if they, sounds like they're keeping him around here, giving him a chance, and this is time for the players to step up and show what they said in the media and battle for their coach. And and we'll see here. I mean, it's a tough little stretch, but if they can kind of get back on track here, I mean, that's what they need to do. They need to show some character. Not that this team doesn't have that, but show it here and fight for your coach. And I think he deserves that at least.
Yeah, and I'll say it's interesting because look down the 401 at Toronto a couple of times the last couple of years. The wheels have about to come off and they've gone on a run. With the Ottawa Senators, there have been a couple of times people say, well, it's bad. I mean, bad relative to where you're at in the season's going. There's a couple of times here where I thought they were down and out and they rallied. And to me, that does speak to the relationship with the coach. But let's take it to the next layer and the next level, because we talked yesterday about Brady Tkachuk. And one of the things that I look at, and this is where you can become kind of a rudderless ship and everything else. How impressive is it? And we'll get into a little bit of, I'm not a captain fan, and I'm not a captain fan in the Canadian markets in particular, but how impressive is it that Brady Tkachuk can take on the leadership role, basically put the franchise on his shoulders and the coach, Justin, and at the same time be successful as a player? Like think about that. A lot of guys, even the veteran guys, the guys, for Alfie when he was here, it becomes an incredible burden. What kind of a leader does that show when it comes to a guy like Brady Tkachuk?
You couldn't want a better captain than this guy. He is just full of character. His family's that. He's been around the game in multiple ways. He's lived it. He knows what it is, and that other players sense that too, and that rubs off on them as well. So I think long term, I mean, you couldn't be happier to have a better guy. He's a warrior. And there's a guy that once he makes the playoffs, I mean, look out. Like that's, and I think that's why fans are dying for the playoffs too, because they look around, they go, oh my God, like if we can get in here, we can do something, I think. And it just takes it's going to take some tweaking and that. And, but I'm not worried about Brady Tkachuk by any means. And he seems proud to be an Ottawa Senator. He's proud to be who he is. And he just needs to stay on that path and continue to work his ass off, and the team will be in good shape.
Yeah, and kind of could go a million different directions with that. And the first one, because it was the last thought I had, and we'll get back to some other ones. It's interesting, and I don't fault Matthew at all. Whatever the dynamic was in Calgary, decided to go to Florida. I'll be honest with you, if I had the opportunity, maybe someday we'll be able to do the show in Florida, Justin, as we evolve to be a global brand. Brady is a lot like Keith. And I look to this and I think about Dougie Wade and Billy Guerin when they went to Edmonton back in the day. I thought, well, they're going to last about 5 minutes and then all of a sudden they're going to be mad. Their wives are going to be mad. Well, of course, for a background, Keith met a Winnipeg girl. Of course, Craig Oster, who's a super agent, his agent ended up being Craig's sister. But the way he embraced it, I remember talking to Randy Carlisle when Randy was a kid, he was a captain in Winnipeg. He came right in, ice fishing, skidoo, and embraced the culture and the life. And I do think for Brady, and that's where I will say, and somebody brought it up after Pierre Dorion was fired, there's no doubt I give credit. Getting Brady Tkachuk away from a bridge deal and the craziness of that and getting to sign on long-term was a monumental piece for this franchise. And for him to choose that. And then also to that, Justin, and you've been behind the scenes or you've talked to family members. How many times do you have captains that are just absolute bullshit artists? They get out and say all the right things, but you can't hide in the dressing room, right? The players know, they see your habits, they see the way you act, even your sarcasm. And that's the difference with Brady Tkachuk, where there's lots of other guys that are like, out in front of the media, oh my God, this guy's such a great leader. He just loves being here. Yeah. And then he rolls in the dress. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's not a phony.
And that's, to me, the dream, right? You need the guy that leads the way and is able to pull everybody else along. So I guess if you're DJ Smith, that you're thrilled you have that.
There's scouts. I mean, dream to draft a guy like that. That is a scouts type of player right there.
Yeah. And it is amazing when you think back to the situation and drafts and the manipulation of trying to force things. And all of a sudden, right down the road with Montreal, where Kotkaniemi suddenly came on the board. And you think to yourself, like, talk about a franchise. And from an Ottawa perspective, Brady Tkachuk's off the board. Who do you take? Do you take Kotkaniemi? Do you take Zadina? Where would the franchise be? You'd have these nice pieces, but you don't end up having the whole anchor there. Yeah, I think it's absolutely incredible. So I just applaud that. I look to that and think, hey, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now as we go, what's that?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, and like a lot of people, looked at his goals that he scored in the NCAA and were like, are we seriously taking this guy this high?
Yeah.
And it's like, if that's where you got to watch and not watch one game. You got to watch and show what he brings and know the kid too. And that's a lot of it I've learned over time is that you got to want it in anything in life. Like any job you do, there's people going to be more successful than others. And a lot of that comes down to the work ethic. And when you know those players that you're drafting, that makes a big difference.
Oh, does it ever? And it's funny. I watched his dad when he first turned pro twofold before he even turned pro. I went to a game in Albany when Canada and the U.S. were playing tune up to the Olympics. He and Bill Guerin, meaning Keith, hopped on the ice. They chased Eric Lindros, who was playing on Oshawa at the time, around the rink. They hated him. And I think we saw that come to boil in the 96 World Cup of Hockey. Then I saw Keith Tkachuk. I'm out in Winnipeg, freezing my ass off in that half outdoor rink. And he's on a line with Zhamnov and Solani. You talk about an impact. And let's go back to the scouting. And this is the one, because I remember that as well. And I didn't see him. And I have some fun with it at times. But I asked Pierre Dorion, what did you see with Brady? He said, well, first of all, he didn't have a center. And then, as you said, you watch him, you understand the pedigree of what he has. But I'm sure you'll agree, one of the hardest things is going around and scouting lower levels, prep school. Schools like tier 2 out in BC and trying in God's name to project a guy and say to yourself, and we're not talking second round, Justin, we're talking like a Kyle Turris or high picks where you're going to say, listen, like you're going to draft him out of the Brooks Bandits and tell me that he's going to end up winning Norris Trophy. How was that transition and how long did it take you to feel you figured that out?
It's so I definitely thought I understood kind of ability and talent, but the more you watch, and now it's a lot easier for me watching guys in the league that I watched, 5, 6, 7 years ago develop, and you kind of learn to see what actually is playing. And a lot of it is you have to have that skill to play in the league, but then you also have to match that with your work ethic and want. And it is hard. When you typically, like other sports, you might be watching just college and there's no different variations of leagues. So when you're going from a tier 2 to tier 2 to like NCAA, then Quebec League or Ontario League, and then back down to Junior A and prep, it's a big difference. They got to really, really, really stand out when they're in those lower leagues, and they have to have a dimension that you think they're going to bring to the NHL. And then those guys are going to have to work even harder because they're kind of lower at that level. And that's a big thing.
Yeah, and what's really changed now, the NCAA, there's no more of this bullshit about, hey, you know what, the NCAA is a different route. They produce ready to go.
Yeah.
I play with a kid, and people won't know. He wasn't a big name, Troy Millette. Played junior with Troy. He was the first pick overall in the OHL. Went on to play a little in the National Hockey League.
Yeah.
But what you also learn, and I'll probably say this is the Brett Lindros effect, the man-child. And the man-child at the lower level that's dominating, it's hard to pick up the hockey sense. And to the part of drafting and scouting, I remember going on my first trip with the late, great Jack Button, and we went out west, and I was talking about an overage player, I think on Brandon, and I'm like, Jack, he looks pretty good. No clue what I'm talking about, but I'm trying to justify why he took me on the trip. We end up getting him packed up, send him to Portland, Maine. Barry Trotz gets a load of him, and he's like, who in F recommended this guy? Why did we pay his flight and for him to come in? And I got to say, Justin, I meant that for probably the first 5 or 6 years. And maybe some guys have it right away, and certainly guys that played a long time. But it took me a long time to have a trained eye. And to your point, the projection, and then that's where it goes back to, if I got that guy in the United States that's watched prep school hockey for a long time, has seen other players go from that level up, that's where you rely on your regional guys, right? To say, listen, seen this before. And then the other part, we had drafted a guy like Keith Jones years ago. And if people know now he's running the Philadelphia Flyers, we were only going to draft him if he got a scholarship as a 19-year-old to Western Michigan. Where they're going in a program is a big part of it as well.
Yeah.
How are they going to continue their progress to ultimately come into your system in the National Hockey League?
Yeah, you definitely want to know, and you even see it in junior, and I'm more of a junior guy. I didn't watch a ton of the NCAA, but there's certain programs that produce players more so than others, right? So when you know where they're headed to next, that could make a difference. And because let's say at the 6th, 7th round, you're taking a guy, to say one guy's better than the other, you really don't know, but you might as well take the guy that's going on the right path, going to the right organization. That's going to give you a chance to really improve over time. Look at how many players London Knights have produced, right? So it's big time. If a guy's going to London versus another team, I don't want to speak poorly about other teams, but you might take the guy going to London, right? And why wouldn't you? They learn how to win. They learn to practice like pros. And they learn to work out and care like pros. And there's other guys that are, 19 years old, probably drafted in the first round, that you're going to be competing against day in and day out.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's where going through it myself as a player in the OHL draft, guys manipulating the draft. I thought, come on. Remember Adam Graves back in the day didn't want to go up north. He ends up going to Windsor. Now I get it. And for the player, that's my right. And if I don't go, 100%. I get a chance to choose. And for teams drafting guys at 18 years old, now you see Europeans and college kids go in the American League, which before you couldn't do. It was too physical, too much. Well, you get a chance to now be part of their development, grab a hold of them, put them into the system. And then to me, that ends up making a huge deal. And I'll say that in a shout out to Dave Cameron. I saw today where he's going into the Hall of Fame in PEI. I know, of course, you worked with Dave in Ottawa.
Great.
But think about the program that him and James Boyd have developed here in Ottawa, to your point of, it's an elite development program. Mm-hmm. And now if you've got a kid, if you're a father, a family member, you're an agent, you're excited and saying, even a European kid, right? The European draft, well, I'm not coming over unless I go to a good program. And what a great job has Dave done.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's 67s. They kind of had some down years whenever I was scouting, but they've really turned a corner here, and it's good. I mean, them and Gatineau have both been great. It's nothing better than watching them play against each other at the home and home or whatever. I mean, it's great hockey. It gets even extra physical. But it's great to see. And obviously as scouts in this area, they love whenever the team's good as well and producing players, because it's a lot easier for
and everybody used to crap on the Quebec League. And that was one thing last year when I went to watch. Here's the top team in the Ontario League. Hull came in, and I think I saw you at the game, Justin. Yeah. They manhandled them. And I remember thinking to myself, listen, Ottawa may be the up-and-coming team, but they're not going to go deep in a playoff when I just watched the 4th best team in the Quebec League come through and just absolutely dominate them. So it's been nice to see the emergence of the Quebec League. And as you said, for both of those proud programs, there was the dark days going out to the CTC, as you said, lost their way, but they're 100%. Back, and boy, they're doing some great things.
It's funny, actually, like the one positive for that, for me, is you would see those Western Ontario League teams roll in. So Alex Formenton, Robert Thomas, they didn't play a ton down, in the first half of the year at all with London. And then you come up here to maybe, North Bay, who wasn't as good, Kingston, and Ottawa, you get to see those guys play more minutes. And I was actually lucky enough to see Alex Formenton score a goal there, go up to North Bay and watch them and play well. And you start to realize maybe we had those guys a little lower on our list, not by anyone's fault, just because you didn't get to see them as much. But when they're here, you would get to. So.
Yeah, it's almost like if you were the NCAA when it comes to basketball and football, if you're trying to draft a freshman, right? You're trying to draft a guy that on the Alabama depth chart is the fourth quarterback. So when's the opportunity to see? And we might as well segue into it. What do you make of, and I'm not going to get into the scandal of the 2018 World Junior team, because I think what that speaks to itself, and I'm not just trying to be politically correct. I totally understand it. But I don't understand is that nothing's ever come of it. Here's a guy a year and 10 games into his hockey, with the National Hockey League. He's neither been suspended or signed. I guess just thoughts on, first of all, what a loss that is for Ottawa, and why the mysterious handling of it when he's never been any charges pressed or anything happened to it.
Yeah, I'm not really privy to any of that information, so I don't really, and we aren't, so I'm not sure exactly what's going on. But as a player, I can talk about him, and we missed that speed in the lineup. He was a young kid for his age, and he just was taking off. And it's, what did he score? 18 goals. Can play the penalty kill.
I think it was close to 20. Justin.
Our penalty kill isn't great right now. Yeah. That's a guy that would help that. Would help that penalty kill big time, and just add some depth. And he probably wanted to get paid after that 18 goals as well, but that hurts. You have Pinto suspended, you have Formenton gone. It hurts the organization with depth, and when you have high-end talent on your team, you need to have depth at the bottom to supplement, so you can roll those lines and be scary every line that comes out, and you can roll them. And that's important in an 82 game season. And so that'd be
a nice long playoff. And that's it. And I beat it to death last year, but it's amazing because the hardest part of putting a team together is what Ottawa has in place. And we'll get into some of the pro scouting and the augmentation, where it's a dream if you're going to start with Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stutzle, and Jake Sanderson. If you said to me around the league, give me a trio to start a team with, I'll tell you what, it'd be tough to argue. But last year, the swing of Joseph not coming to play, whether he was injured or not, losing Paul, but the Connor Brown to Formenton, those three players and the impact they made in the bottom six of the lineup compared to last year, I think it's the difference of them making the playoffs. That's what it meant.
100%. Those depth guys make an issue, that make a big impact now. Yeah. Especially if that third line or fourth line could go out and win shifts every game. It makes a massive difference, and it puts a lot of less pressure on your goalies and on your back end when those guys can go out and give you shifts. And then when injuries happen, this league is 32 teams now, 16 teams make the playoffs. The teams less injured, everyone's so close. The teams with less injuries are going to be better off. And you need that depth to supplement. Now with the salary cap, it makes it tougher, obviously, but that's where good picks help your organization, and really you are what you draft. So if you draft well with size, you become that as a team, and if you draft smaller and miss on picks, you're gonna lack depth and not be hard to play against.
Yeah, and you look at the Rangers, when all of a sudden they end up with Panarin and they ended up with the Trouba trade. You can argue how that impacted. And then Mika Zibanejad just doesn't happen very often, Justin. You got to build through the draft. You got to have that. And to that, from Ottawa's perspective last year, the swing of Norris being out, Pinto sliding up, there was nothing. They had one line. They had the second line that was good but couldn't defend. And then after that, the bottom just kind of dropped out. Now they're trying to get back to that a little bit. Now, as we do in a hockey-centric Ottawa show, we got to go to the breakdown of the lines for the game in Toronto tomorrow. That's what we do when we're going to go deep into the Ottawa Center. So I guess some thoughts on what we're looking for tomorrow. And we'll start with the forward group and just a little switch into the furniture. I wouldn't get too worked up. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on Kelly, Yarventi, and McEwen. Thoughts on the top nine and just some of the moving, in particular, the breaking up of the top line.
I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to have three lines that can produce some offense. I mean, obviously that third line center in Chartier, I wish that was Pinto in there, and I think we would be looking much better. I think he's, no offense to him, he's probably not a everyday NHLer, but he comes in and competes every day because he's here, and you can't knock that. I think I'd like to see Tarasenko with more minutes, if possible. I think he's done a really good job, and I think he brings something from an outside organization to this team that guys can learn from as well. I mean, he's been around the block, he's won. So yeah, where are your thoughts on the forward lines?
Well, I kind of break it down now. Now I'm sensing here, and this is a little detection for myself. You're still, and Henry Burris did this a long time as well after retired. I'm hearing some "we" mentioned when it comes to the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't be doing that. That used to bother me whenever I was.
No.
I know that's that used to bother me when I was with the team, and now I'm doing it. So.
No, it's nothing. I'm just having fun with you.
No, I know for sure.
Again, to that, I kind of go through it, and I look at a few things here. I didn't feel like the first line was necessarily clicking. We'll get into some of the Stutzle talk. Norris, Batherson, Tkachuk's had some luck in the past. You got to figure out something with Batherson. I mean, this guy's soft as church music, and I love him as a player, love him as a story. First of all, he needs a complete kick in the ass. He needs to get going. And had this debate with JR and Hammer a couple of years ago. And the favorite term that I ever got from a hockey person, and we were about to make a trade, and I was working with Brian Trottier in Portland. And I was sitting there with George McPhee, and he said, "George, what do you think of a particular player?" And then he said, "Brian, what do you think of this player?" And he said, "I'd love to play against him." And I'll tell you what, unfortunately for Jake Batherson, he's right on that list. I've never seen a guy be so less physical. Never. Have you ever seen him make eye contact with and I know it's a different time, but he doesn't engage. And he does a little razzle dazzle and some shots and some backhand passes. But I'll tell you what, man, this guy's got to bring some power to his game, and he needs a serious kick in the ass.
He signed the contract. I mean, did he not bring that a little bit? So
absolutely. So and I know people say that.
And he was one of my favorite guys. I loved him, like hockey sense, like crazy. And now it's just kind of like he's lost it all. I don't know.
And what a great story.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, had his dad
exactly. And then got Sens. Trent Mann loved him, was from out there, stepped up to take him in a round probably before another team in our division wanted to take him. And it was a great pick. And he played very, very well. That contract looked like a great contract at one point. Sure. And he really needs to kind of figure it out. And can he? Sure. But it's bad habits. Yeah. Eventually, they kill you.
Yeah, and they really do at the end of the day. And I say to this is that, you know what, for a guy like this, and this is also tough for coaches, it's not natural for him. And I don't want to take that away because it's not like, I don't think he's a lazy person. Certainly on the defensive side of the puck, I think he could use a wake-up call and basically sit down and say, listen, look at your shift here. I know you're not a physical player, which we are going to address. You're in cruise control. You're cruising all over the ice. You're cruising here. You're not picking people up. Then the physicality, and this is the tough part for coaches, having to sit down and ride a guy like this every night. And Chris Kreider's the same way with the New York Rangers. And here he is, a big 50-goal scorer, but they got to ride his ass every night. Mm-hmm. Even Mika Zibanejad, that's not easy. That's also where you have to switch out coaches once in a while. And that guy like Batherson, it's not natural, but he's got to show that. And he doesn't have to worry about playing 20 years ago where he has to fight all the time. Get down and acquire space down low. Make things happen. Use your body. Start protecting the puck.
Well, when
you're leaving your zone, man. Come on.
Yeah, he used to make smart plays all over the ice, good stick, protect the puck, and we just don't even see that anymore, really.
Yeah.
Until late in the game when need to score a garbage goal or something like that. He's good for that, but which is too bad because I think that could really, really help the lineup when he's going.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I even look at a guy like down the road, Austin Matthews. And, Austin to me is not real natural to be overly physical. Now he's a bigger body. Yeah. But again, you just have to impose yourself sometimes, make things happen. And as far as the lineup itself, interesting. When you're talking about this, and I think this is a nice problem in Sensland now, if we're being critical of players and Stutzle and Tkachuk, and if you want to talk about Drew to Norris to Tarasenko, even Batherson, they're all point of game players or better. That's not a bad thing to be 100%. Arguing where you would swear the way we're talking right now that you pull up the stats and think that they all got, average and half point a game.
And I guess that's where I look at things like this team will score. This team will score. We just need to, they need to start to want to make an emphasis on letting in 0, 1, 2 goals a game, and they'll naturally score to kind of beat the team they're playing. And it's that's the frustrating part, I think, sometimes for fans probably, is that if they did take care of their own end and played a little smarter, that it would give them a much better chance to win, because they have that natural goal scoring ability and the good power play and all that.
Yeah, and you look at contrasts here, and we'll get into either today or tomorrow talking about Vancouver. And I go back to, and maybe it's a shelf like Guy Boucher, but when Sutter took over Calgary, the simple premise was to come back in your zone as a 5-man unit and leave as a 5-man unit.
Yeah.
Ottawa has never established that with this group. So you start to go forward, everyone's cheating, the defense aren't supported, and you say to yourself, well, look at Vancouver. And to the numbers, Ottawa in 5-on-5 scoring this year is 9th. They're 4th in the league in scoring itself. Power play hasn't been great. So that's a good sign, but you look at, and is there a better example of what Rick Tocchet has done with Vancouver? And I know it's early, but isn't that amazing?
I agree.
What a coaching change can do.
When you watch Vancouver, when you watch the good teams play, they're always, it's like the onus isn't on the puck carrier to make a good play. There's so much movement from the other guys, almost kind of like soccer in a sense. They're creating open lanes to make it easier for the puck carrier. And that's Sanderson's very good at that. He's always active, getting into different areas of the ice to give that option to the other players, where Ottawa, I find it's just static. You're just skating up in your lane, kind of not creating a different angle, and that's coaching. That's, they're lacking creativity. They're, and that's the frustrating part, because I think that, to me, it should be the easy part of the game, is understanding that the whole game is spacing and movement whenever you have the puck, and supporting the player with it. And you just don't see that really.
Yeah, and I love that. I'll say the European influence, and I'll go no further than the Swedes and the intelligent. And when Alfie and that wave came over, that soccer mentality that when you don't have the puck, you actually find an open space. Like we used to be so linear when we grew up, right?
Yes,
it was just straight up and down.
Lane,
all of a sudden they start creating, and I guess you could say the Russian 5 and the Russian teams way back, they brought that, the impact and how much the game has changed itself, and how much you want to, and just thoughts on Stutzle. Because when I've watched him this year, you can't look at the stats and say to yourself, okay, he's not showing up. Part of this now is expectations. He's on the radar of being a star, but I got to be honest with you, and Mira alerted me a little bit. I'll tell you what, and I wonder when teammates, and again, fans I know are very protective of their players, this falling down and whining to the official stuff, as you know, this isn't just about the officials in the National Hockey League. For teammates, that stuff gets old in a hurry. And when you're not a great defensive player either, I'm watching this guy in games now, and I'm like, man, can you not stay on your feet? And from that standpoint, as a referee, I have no idea. I don't know if you're getting hauled down or if you're falling.
No, and I mean, you watch a guy like Elias Pettersson, who's gotten much stronger, in my opinion. Used to fall a little bit. Maybe
we only weighed about $160.
100%. So now, and now he's not like that. He was just protecting the puck, throwing guys off his back. 2 games ago, I was watching. So you hope that Timmy can kind of get stronger, and hope that changes. But he also has to definitely change his mindset. No one likes diving. And you're never going to get the benefit of the call whenever you actually were taken down, and I think maybe that's a frustrating part for him as well. But he definitely needs to improve on that. We don't have much time for that in North America as much compared to the European games. So definitely needs to improve on that. But I think getting stronger as well should help that as well.
Yeah, I agree. And the other part, I don't want to fault him for keeping his legs going. I like the guys that do it. Ultimately, Formenton was the same way. You're going to draw some penalties. And back to his rookie year, Montreal's all over him. I get it. But when I look at Stutzle right now, and this is kind of the thing when he came into the league, I thought he'd be a star. My only reservation at the time was, is he going to turn into the guy that wants to do it all by himself all the time? A little bit of the blinders on. And then we saw last year where he slowed it down a little bit, a lot more give and go, a lot more of using. And again, in meaning well so far this year, Justin, I feel like he's gone back to that same idea where it's wind it up, try to do it all myself. And as much as I mean well, you are, and another example of, quite simply, you're not playing properly.
And I think that happens when things aren't necessarily going well with your team as well. You're like, he wants it, right? So
big time. Exactly. He wants
it. So I'm happy that he does. It's just like, let's settle down here a little bit and get back to how we played whenever things were going well, and then maybe that's just watching some video on a few games last year where he was a superstar, you know, and he's still young. He's still young, and he's not been playing well, and he has the amount of points that he does right now. I mean, I'm not going to be worried. I mean, you'd want him to play better right now because you need some wins, but long term, I mean, this guy's is a hell of a player. And the sky's the limit for him.
No, and you look right down the road there where you fool yourself, and you've been there as well. You have a guy like Kotkaniemi, and you see little flashes, and Slafkovsky will get into other times. Like, I don't know if this guy is going to be Danis Zubris or Alexander Volchkov, a guy drafted who was a dud. You're just hoping, and then you see a goal or a flash, and you're like, oh my God, no, Timmy Stutzle is going to be a great player, and that's the part you worry about. Back to the lineup itself, just some quick critiques, but how much does it mean for a team that lacks defensive conscience to bring back a guy like Zub, to have him paired with Sanderson, and don't look any further than the fact of going into Toronto on the road and then returning home against Vancouver?
Yeah, I mean, he helps the lineup tremendously. Just bring some stability, some comfort there. He removes the puck easily, never in trouble. Helps on the penalty kill. Like he's that's what the league is now a lot. You're gonna have your really good defensemen, and then you need guys like this that help you win. And he's the epitome for that. And it's going to make a big difference coming in the lineup.
Yeah, and I look back to, and again, you're so leery of these college free agents, which there's nothing wrong to try. And I know your father has some great luck with Kunitz and Penner and some guys like that. And I don't know how many other teams. We end up with Jeff Halpern. If you just found a player, you were thrilled. Teams like St. Louis were just pissing away money, never end up with anybody. But when this guy came over, and I'm like, okay, he's from Haberostk, and he's got a few points. And then you're kind of wondering in training camp, I didn't watch him. That game he dressed in Calgary, his first game. I couldn't believe it. Like, I couldn't believe, first of all, he wasn't in the lineup. I couldn't believe, I'm like, wow, this guy. And again, you think about Mark Mathot, there's just players you're watching. I always thought scouting, finding defensemen might have been one of the hardest things. Well, if I could do a teaching tape on a guy how to defend and play properly, this guy was like, oh my, he's what Cody Ceci would have dreamed of when you drafted him, could have turned into.
100%. And it's tough with the defenseman. I'll do a rant on that another day, but
I found it the hardest thing, Justin, to identify.
And so you have the smaller D that and I don't say smaller, like let's say 6-footer that played all his life having the puck. So he's not going to be good defensively right off the bat, but if he's good enough to handle the puck in that, you hope that he can turn into that. And that's also wanting to turn into being good on the defensive side of the puck. And then you have some of the bigger defensemen that don't ever end up playing or helping a team really be good till they're 26 and they've gone through two other teams, you know, so it's a fine line of how to pick those defensemen. But if you can find those guys in Europe that know what they are, have developed and have some size and some reach, I think you can do well. And like Montepallo is one of those guys that I'm like, when I watch, I want to see more and more of him because I think he can bring that stability there. And maybe he won't. Maybe he's in over his head after 10 games. But in the little that I saw, I got to think that there's something there. And in a full lineup with no injuries, I'd love to see him on the let's say the third pair and what he can bring there. And he just everything's simple. You don't get yourself into trouble. Size and reach to go around. And he's played pro hockey. He's gotten the reps. So I would be very, very interested to see what they have in him.
Yeah, I agree. And that is, again, go a million different ways. When you talk about Europe, you talk about training. I'll go back to the trade when they brought in a guy like Brandstrom. And you're looking at this. And first of all, I'm wondering, okay, if he's not Phil Housley, I basically thought you're getting Quinn Hughes. What are you getting? And when you look to some of the maturity of the guys in the Vegas system, I'm sure some of those guys in the OHL weren't the sexiest players when they got drafted. Twofold. You mentioned, first of all, maturation coming along a little slower, but also going into a good system. You can get all caught up in Theodore and Petrangelo. Go through the rest of that crew. And if you watch them alone, and I'll even say for the way Holden was taught the little bit he was there, then he came into Ottawa. And when you get into Montepallo, it's exactly what you're talking about with Bernard Docker. I like Bernard Docker. I was really kind of bullish of him, but I've seen it through to the point where the physical maturity should be in place. He is not able to handle the National Hockey League game. So I don't know that Montepallo can end up doing it. What I can tell you right now is that Bernard Docker, when you go into Toronto tomorrow night, is not going to be a good matchup. And I'll take it a step further. Well, of course, when I bring a guy like this in, big space heater, as you said, an experienced guy, 27 years old, I want to throw him with Chychrun. I don't want to put him in a third pairing with Clevin, who's finding his way. Give me a good anchor. That's what you're trying to. And this is what I said all the years when Mathot came in with Carlson and even with Thomas Chabot. I don't need to go and find another Thomas Chabot.
No.
I need to find a complement of what Zub is to Sanderson.
Yeah.
So give the big boy a look, give him a try. And I couldn't agree more. That's the other critique on the defense if I do that, because with JBD, unfortunately, he can't contain down low. He doesn't box out. And in time and space, for as good as his hockey sense is, Justin, there's just not a whole lot happening. He's tracked all the time, and it just leads to trouble. And on the penalty kill, unfortunately, not enough reach at the same time.
Yeah, no, I agree. So like with the full lineup, it would be interesting to see how they play and plug that guy in and what he would look like. And if not, that's fine. But at least you kind of did your due diligence to see and gave him a proper chance. Sometimes that's all it takes is just giving a guy a chance.
Well, and you also know when the pressure is up. And in this case, I with JBD, there's not even a big track record, but the part that'll happen, and this is basically, and I use the relation to pitchers and slotting and defensemen, and you get into, first of all, the proper slotting that Ottawa had not bad at the start of the year, but then you get into pitch count. And you look at a guy like Travis Hamonic, if you're going to play him more than 10 minutes and you're going to play him anything away from the penalty kill, you're quite simply asking for trouble. What's the fallback going to be like tomorrow against Toronto and Vancouver? All of a sudden, JBD's struggling. Hamonic's right back into the top four, and then you're asking for even more trouble. That's the part where I wish the coach, and I know there's a lot of pressure right now, would at least have the vision to try a bigger body like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's what the game is becoming more and more. These bigger guys can skate and handle better than ever, and just need to be efficient out there.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I'm excited to kind of see what ends up happening in Toronto. We didn't have a time yesterday, and certainly when we talk every day and whatever it ends up being, we're coming up on an hour. I still feel ready to rock and roll. I'm 3 Javas deep, and I just bought Miro this new coffee machine, and I hadn't had coffee. I haven't had booze for 2 months. But I haven't had coffee for 6 months. So now it's back in the system. I feel like, the space shuttle, the good ones, not the one that blew up. I feel like I'm just ready to rock and roll. So let's take a little twirl around the league. Now I'm stealing that from Graham Creech. So Creacher, if you're listening, that was yours to go around the National Hockey League. What in God's name has happened to the Edmonton Oilers?
What's your thoughts first?
Well, when I go through it, Jess, first of all, I thought they've always been a bit overrated. And I thought they've always, every year, been 2 years ahead of the program. Yeah. They forced everything. Then it's the big boys are on the clock and we've got to make some changes. I did think coming into this year, as far as the lineup, I thought Connor Brown, we can get into that a little bit, coming off one of my favorite guys, coming off the knee surgery. I thought they were pretty good, but in the back of the mind, and we go to, why is this team struggling? Why is the coach getting fired? What's the common denominator? And your good friend and the late great Brian Murray from Washington, but probably the best example for Brian would have been Detroit. Why did Brian lose his job? Bob Asenza. Not far the ball, Bob Asenza, but he didn't have a goalie in Detroit. That's the only reason he got moved on. And also smart enough that Kenny Holland and Jimmy D slid right into the office there, recognized things. But anyways, I look at this and Jack Campbell, the year that he finished with Toronto and the year he played in Edmonton, he was statistically the worst goalie in the National Hockey League. And he does not, and this is something I relate to really well, Justin. I had nervous energy when I played. Remember my first training camp talking to Clint Malarchuk, and I'm like, man, do you get nervous? He's like, Shawn, do I get nervous? He says, I get sick. I get so nervous. I'm like, really? And he's like, the fear of failure. And exactly how I felt. And when I watched Jack Campbell play in Toronto, and then I think you're signing up with Edmonton, the pressure, his nervous energy, he's not going to get better. He's not going to go there. And as far as Skinner, I don't know him well enough. It was a bit of a stretch with the rookie stuff on a pretty good team. At the end of the day, what do I think the situation is? I don't think they have any goaltending. And when Jack Campbell's in year 2 of a $25 million 5-year contract playing $6 million on a cap team, you're not moving him. So what do I think? Either Skinner does it or you do a little Devin Dubnyk, of course, was a first-round pick a number of years ago by Edmonton, ended up going to Minnesota off the scrap heap. I'll say a little bit with Forsberg here in Ottawa. What do they got to do right now? They got to go scrap heap. They got to go hunting right now. Find a little something. One of those shops like Restovation, where you get the old rusty car and you come in and just tune that bad boy up. That's what they need. Yeah. And at the same time, would you have thought, as they are 2-8-1, 11 games in, that they might end up needing a coaching change.
So this is one like debate with my buddies all the time, actually. I mean, you could see it for a while. I think just the top guys played so well, they masked a lot of the issues, right?
Yeah.
It's breakdown after breakdown, turnover after turnover, odd man rush after odd man rush. And then obviously when the goalies aren't standing on their head, that makes it even worse. And there's a team that probably doesn't play the right way, lacks structure. And when things are rolling, that's great, you know, but McDavid's probably hurt right now, not playing his best. And when he's not at the top of the league in points, I mean, this team is going to struggle, unfortunately. And that's really what it is. Now, did I think that there's some young guys coming that could help with the depth with McLeod, Holloway, you know, Bouchard and stuff like that? Yes, but it just hasn't been, it hasn't been working out. And
historically, their drafting's been a gong show too. Yeah. I mean, when you honestly, if you could imagine, if you would even way back on Yakupov, but most recently Puljujarvi, a pick like that, where you're sitting there kind of with your pants down, when all of a sudden he's passed on by Columbus, Dubois is gone, and you're like, well, oh my God, I didn't think he'd be here. And then you get into Yamamoto, and Bouchard's a nice player on the power play, but again, soft as church music. You start to go through some of the depth, and then I don't believe this whole, you know what, two superstars, and hey, what the hell did the Pittsburgh Penguins do with Malkin and Crosby and win multiple Stanley Cups? I don't believe this is a theory. You can't. Hey, the Vegas experiment is awesome, but I still think there's something to do. The part there when the expectations, and that's also a market, I'll say, for the media, they cheer for their team. And I don't mean that as a negative, but they don't ramp up like you see in Toronto where they build you up and all of a sudden blow you up. People in Edmonton want the team to do well, but that pressure that swirls in Winnipeg and Edmonton, I think even Vancouver, far greater than Ottawa, where it appears to take on a life of its own. And now to say to yourself, I believe they play San Jose. Like, how much lower can you go? And at the same time, being honest with yourself, if you need to get to 95 points, pretty simple math here. I'm at 5 points. I need another 90 points. When do you run out of track?
This is the game here, right here.
And that's the part that sucks about hockey is that people can deny it. And Pierre Maguire brought up other people. Pretty much the standings are when you get to American Thanksgiving, if you're in a playoff spot, you're going to make it. If you don't, now we play the games and you're in the race and we're going to play meaningful games like the Ottawa Senators. But that is a simple reality. And I'll also say this going back to, and I didn't believe this point when your grandfather used to talk about it, when Brian talked about it and again, I think it was a bit of sales, but when he first took over Ottawa and they're getting there in, 2010, 11, he used to say anything can happen when you make it in the playoffs. I really believe, Justin, we are more into that era now where if you are good enough as a 32 team league to make it as one of the 16, I do believe now
100%
that you're absolutely, and if you can manipulate the rules like Tampa and Vegas did, where sure enough you could squeak in, which not many teams can.
No.
But if you can then do, but to your point, if you can get in now, the Ottawa Senators, could they go on a run in the playoffs? I do believe that now, or I didn't believe that 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, and that's fair, and that's I think there's a lot of this league is better than ever. There's a lot of good players, and but it's harder than ever to make the playoffs. So it's like that yin and yang, right? So once you're in, you have a chance, but it's awfully hard to make them now.
Yeah, and the other part that I think is nice when we saw a couple of years ago, and we have a lot of Montreal listeners, including our good friend Tony Marinero. I thought that was too bad when Montreal slid into the playoffs and this all of a sudden the rules changed. They had that big, slow, physical blue line. You're like, okay, you're telling me if I build that team most years, they won't make the playoffs. Now they're in, they go far. I feel like that switch back where it's like, okay, this is a style of hockey we're going to see in the regular season. This is what we're going to see in the playoffs. You try to build accordingly. But your point on injuries, it's just like the National Football League. You can call it all you want, and they'll say, hey, who at the end of the 17th game, who actually has a healthy lineup and has an opportunity to then go on a nice long run of a couple of months to win a cup.
No, completely agree. That's kind of that to me. That's what the league is now, just because there are so many teams and so many good players that naturally those healthier teams are going to rise to the top.
All right. Well, we've been cruising on along. And again, I got a little bit of Java here. We're already at 104. So let's wrap her up for today, Justin. Thanks. We wanted to get into, and we will talk tomorrow because a bit of your point, and this is the influence. And I love going on the Score app. If anybody's out there looking for an app that tracks the National Hockey League, one of the things we've seen, and we don't need to show the graphic today, I love the diversity. And look at goaltenders. You could say that the top 4 goalies in the NHL are Russian, but when you look to scoring stats now, I love the American and European influence mixed with Canada. That has created the depth to allow for 32 teams. Maybe we see more, but let's chew on that bad boy tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. We will be setting up our very first Ottawa Senators Sick podcast, Simmer Down, Justin Murray game day. And it's a Battle of Ontario, which really doesn't exist anymore, but it is at least a Toronto Maple Leafs. It'll be a whole lot of fun. So again, thank you for tuning in yesterday, today. This week, we're just going to have a whole lot of fun with myself and as Justin as a co-pilot. Next week, it's going to be a lot of fun as the team heads to Sweden. Going to have an opportunity to talk to Ian Mendez, Cheryl Pounder, Matthew Barnaby, Nick Kiprios, and Mark Mathot. So we'll be guest heavy, talking a lot. But for right now, just nice to get to know each other, lay a little bit of a base here. And again, thanks for the support. Also, thanks for the feedback. Somebody mentioned my lighting. I had to fire my makeup lady and just basically go to something different. We appreciate that. We got Justin a nice new headset. He's sounding better, looking sharp, very dressed up as well, which I hope there's no dress code going forward.
Nope.
Thank you for everyone for the support.
I got a meeting after.
Oh, that's awesome, brother. Yeah. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. Over and out, and everybody have a beautiful day. Cheers.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Simmer Down with Shawn Simpson on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.